Hey guys, so I'm sorry if I sound a little bit stuffy. I have a sinus infection at the minute. I'm just trying to get a few videos recorded now while I don't sound too stuffy. I feel like I'm getting a little bit worse, so I feel like I might not be able to record in a couple of days' time. So hopefully I can just stay ahead of my schedule and record enough now that, I have time to get better and then start recording again without you guys getting any delays in videos. Anyway, today's subject is social anxiety once again, and specifically whether or not you should tell people that you have social anxiety. Should you just tell absolutely everyone that you have social anxiety? Should it be the first thing that you say when you meet someone? Should you just tell your super close friends? Or should you tell no one? Maybe you should keep it a secret, keep it to yourself. What should you do? Well, if you suffer from social anxiety, you might kind of have a tendency to want to keep it to yourself because you fear that people are going to judge you for having anxiety. I want to suggest that this is not the right approach and that you should in fact share it with other people. I think the best way that I can demonstrate that is by talking about my own experiences with this. So originally I took the approach of not telling people that I had social anxiety. I told a couple of close friends at some point, but I didn't tell the vast majority of people I knew. They didn't know I had anxiety. But this caused some problems of its own. You see, there were things that I did because of my anxiety that, without knowing that I had anxiety, could come off as rude or could come off as, disinterest, stuff like that. Like sometimes in a group conversation, I would just be really, really quiet. And it wasn't because I found the conversation boring. It wasn't because I had nothing to contribute to it. In fact, I, wanted to speak, but I was too anxious to. Another one is phone calls. Often, if one of my friends calls me up on the phone rather than texting me, I simply won't answer. And that is because phone calls are one of the worst things for me for my anxiety. I often just can't handle them. And so, unless I know it's an emergency and I absolutely have to, I would rather just speak to most people over text when we're not in person. I actually have, 1,000 times easier time talking to someone in person than I do over the phone. More recently, I've got a bit better at this, but for the longest time, I basically couldn't do phone calls. So people would ring me up and I just wouldn't answer. And it was as if I was ignoring them, but I wasn't. I would text them and I would ask them what's up and so on. But some people would obviously get annoyed with this because they didn't understand, they didn't know that I had anxiety. Another one, of course, due to my social anxiety, is a lot of the time I didn't want to come to particular events and go out to particular places because I felt anxious there and I felt like I couldn't go. And since these people didn't know that I had anxiety and I never explained that, it just seemed like I didn't want to hang out with them. So you can see how people not knowing about your anxiety can cause some potential problems, but are there any other advantages to people knowing about it? Well, I started off with telling a few close friends about my social anxiety, and I noticed something. Immediately after being open with them about it, I felt so much more comfortable around them. You see, if you have social anxiety, you probably know this, but even, the people that you're most comfortable around, your best friends and so on, there are still times when you feel anxious even around them. Social anxiety, in its nature, basically means there's never a time in a social situation where you're just completely 100% anxiety free. There are lots of times where there's very little, almost no anxiety, but there's always a little bit there, somewhere under the surface usually. But after telling some of my close friends I had social anxiety, it kind of got to the point where around those people, I almost did have no anxiety, because now I didn't feel like there was a part of myself that I was hiding. Now I felt like they wouldn't misinterpret things that I did because of my anxiety. They would know that if they call me and I don't pick up, it's not because I'm avoiding them or being rude or whatever. It's just because I don't like talking on the phone. And they would know that, if I don't go to a particular event with them, it's not because I don't want to hang out with them. It's just because, I find that event too overwhelming or something. And because of that, I felt a lot more comfortable. But on top of that, I noticed something else. Now I actually could go to more of those events with people. I could go out more with these people that knew about my anxiety because I kind of always had an out. I always knew that I could just turn to them and say, okay, I'm feeling too anxious, I'm going to head home or something. I always knew that, if I'm feeling overwhelmed in a situation, I just need to get out there and I just needed a friend to come out with me, then they would be able to do that. And on top of that, I found that none of the people that I told ever judged me negatively for it. So there were basically no disadvantages to telling people about my social anxiety and lots of advantages. So if you, like me, struggle with social anxiety, I highly recommend opening up to people about it. Now this doesn't mean, when you first meet someone, you go, hey, I have social anxiety. You don't have to, spout it out the first thing you say to someone. If you do, it's not the end of the world. I know in your head you probably think if you said something like that, it would be the end of the world, but that's just kind of how we think because of our anxiety. That's not really how it works. People say and do awkward things all the time and 5 minutes later everyone's forgotten about it. But the best thing is just, when you're friends with someone, when you feel like you can open up to them a bit, just tell them. Explain that you have social anxiety, explain what that means to you, what you're particularly anxious about, what things are difficult for you. Maybe explain how that affects the friendship you two have. If you do any of those things, like I mentioned earlier, like maybe you don't pick up the phone all the time, or maybe you don't always want to come out, then mention those things and explain how that's related to your anxiety. It helps the other person understand. You have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to feel weird about. And another thing that might kind of surprise you if you actually do this and you actually tell your friends that you have social anxiety is you might discover that some of your friends actually do too, and they just haven't told you. And that might surprise you as well, because some of those friends might be friends that you previously thought were very confident, outgoing people. Because everyone is different in terms of coping with their anxiety, and some people cope with it a lot better than others. And people experience it in different degrees to each other as well. So most of your friends have probably felt some degree of anxiety, and some more than others. So when you tell them this isn't actually going to be as alien and strange as you think it is. Most of them are going to kind of be able to relate a little bit to what you're saying. So yeah, if you have social anxiety, I highly suggest telling people. Thank you for watching. Make sure you check out my 30-part self-improvement course that you can find a link to in the top right-hand corner and down in the description below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe and enable notifications to stay up to date with my videos. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel, and click one of the videos on screen if you want to keep watching. Take care everyone, and I'll see you soon.